So now here we have a function in example 3 where there's a little bit of a situation. So you think about, well, what values can I have for x? And I can have almost any number I want, except there's one number I can't have. I can't have x be 2, because if I make x 2, then it's going to be 2 minus 2 in the denominator. That's going to be dividing by 0, and I'm not allowed to do that at this point. So I want to say x cannot equal 2. Now, that's true. I can have, any other number. I just can't have x be 2 in this case. But when I'm stating the domain, I'm going to do it in interval notation. Now, it might be helpful for you to see what that graph looks like. If you were to graph all the numbers except 2, it would look like this: parenthesis on up to infinity, and parenthesis down to negative infinity. So you're saying, okay, I can have all the real numbers, I just can't have that number 2. In interval notation, it looks like this. The domain is from negative infinity to 2. You don't include the 2. Union, and then 2 to infinity. It's kind of long, but that's how we write it in interval notation. Those are all the numbers that x can be. We just can't have x be 2 in this case. All right, we have another example. Find the domain of the function. This time there's a square root. So we need to make sure that we're only taking the square root of numbers that are greater than or equal to 0. So whatever is under the square root symbol, and by the way, it could be any even root, so a 4th root or a 6th root. We usually see square roots at this point. It's one of our basic functions in the toolkit, but you could have a function that had like a 4th root in it or something. Okay, but you look at what's under that radical, under the square root, and you have to say, okay, 7 minus x, that's got to be greater than or equal to 0. So you're going to take that expression that's under the radical and make it greater than or equal to 0. And again, it's only if it's an even root. Okay, now that's an inequality that we should be able to solve. Subtract 7 on both sides, and then divide by -1 on both sides. But when you do that, remember when you divide by a negative number, you have to switch the inequality the other way. So we're going to say x has to be less than or equal to 7. So if you think about all the numbers that are less than or equal to 7, those should work out to give you a positive number under the square root symbol. Now, how are we going to write that in interval notation? The domain would be, it's going to be from negative infinity up to 7, and we're going to include the 7. And so that would be the domain. You can also graph this if that's easier for you, to give you a picture of what's going on. We're saying all these numbers that are less than or equal to 7. They didn't ask us to graph the domain, they just wanted the domain.